all be good. All right. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining. I'm Patrick Baker, and I'm your host for Senior Tech Coffee. And today we're going to be discussing older adults, technology, and social justice. And I've got with us today our special guest, Ayana King. And we'll get to some introductions here. Prime of Life Tech, I provide tech support and training for older adults, small businesses, and senior care providers. I've got 30 years experience in IT, and I can work with you remotely or on site. And our guest today, again, is Ayana King, and she is the owner and CEO of Maximum Communications. Welcome, Ayana. Appreciate you joining us
Thank you
today.
for having me. Yeah, for sure. Thank you for the invite.
And Ayana, would you like to maybe introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do and uh, and a little bit about your work in related to the topic that we're going to discuss today?
All right. So thank you for your invite. Again, my name is Ayana King, and I am CEO, owner extraordinaire of Maximum Communication. Um, and really, my business is two parts. So, one part of my business is all about marketing, content strategy, social media. I do a lot of coaching, specifically with small businesses to help them learn how to use social media, to help them put together a content strategy, to show them how it is that they should reach out to media because we forget about public relations being a very important part of marketing. But the second part of my business, which is what brings me here today, is dedicated solely to advocacy of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. I came from a senior living background. So before I started my own business, I worked in senior living as a corporate communications manager for a large senior living provider, which had communities all over the Midwest and down into Florida. And when I started my own business, I knew that talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, specifically when we're talking about senior living and aging services, was going to be a part of what I did because we need to talk about it specifically for aging services because we have some issues there. We have some issues there that we don't like to talk about and maybe we aren't aware of that are just now coming to the forefront. And so I'm excited to be here to talk with you today about the intersection of social justice, tech, and older adults, because I think for a long time, the feeling was that social justice and tech weren't important to older people, specifically to older white people. And that's not true. I know that to be not true. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation today.
Great. And again, I appreciate you joining me today. All right. Actually, I'm going to get out of the screen share now, and we're going straight to the conversation. So, Ralph, you're welcome to keep your camera on if you want, or you're welcome to not. And our other guests as well. Good morning, Patricia. Thank you for joining us today. All righty. So, um, wow, there's a kind of a lot to unravel here regarding older adults, technology, and social justice. Um, Ayana, I've attended some of the talks that you've done through other venues, and it really opened. Oh, you absolutely. And I guess the thing that I came away with is that I thought I knew some things about social justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion, excuse me. And I was, I guess, not surprised to know or to learn what I didn't know. I mean, these are some of the most difficult conversations that we can have right now. And a lot of these types of conversations have really come to the forefront in our society in recent years, but especially this year. Um,
Yeah.
and so, what I want to ask first is maybe just help us get our heads around what is ageism? What does that look like?
Uh, so it looks like a lot of things, but really, in a nutshell, it looks like really minimizing people's experience, minimizing their potential based on their age, based on their age. It's living out a lot of stereotypes about older people and not being willing to understand that we might be wrong in the way we think about, interact with, talk about older adults. And it shows
Indeed.
up everywhere. It shows up in commercials. It shows up in conversations like this when we talk about tech and we leave older people out of it. It shows up if we're talking about senior living. I go back to senior living because that's an industry that I love. Um, we don't include the people who live in our communities sometimes in those very critical conversations when we talk about building communities, when we talk about technology in communities, when we talk about activities. Not every older person likes to play bingo. I like to play bingo, okay? But not every older person likes to play bingo. So see, Patricia says, no, don't give me bingo, right? So all of that is ageism. And ageism, just like racism, just like sexism, just like all of the other ugly isms, right, is part of our culture and how we talk and how we respond or how we don't respond. It's all there. It's all there and it
Mhm.
shows up all the time.
Well, and I've found that it's interesting how it manifests itself in technology. I mean, one of the
Mhm.
things that I walk away from after doing some of the reading I've done in recent months is that um, technology is typically designed rather by young men and women, young, highly paid men and women who oftentimes are not looking beyond their own demographic.
Yes.
And more often than not, older adults are not included in some of the design discussions around technology. I mean, you just have to look at a smartphone to see that, you know, a smartphone was not really designed for old eyes to use or for
Yep.
unsteady hands to use. And
Yeah.
then while there are some accessibility features and changes that you can make so that your technology is a little bit easier to use, it doesn't just come out of the box that way usually. So, um,
Mhm.
um,
That's true.
but I think also there's some false beliefs um, as well about whether or not older adults are even interested in or capable of using technology. And how have you seen that type of thing manifest in your experience working in senior care or just working with folks?
One of the ways that I've noticed how it happens is when we talk about technology and the need for technology, um, I think we say all the right things, but we don't do those things that would really enhance the experience for older adults. So, for instance, we may say, we have Wi Fi, okay? We have Wi Fi in our building, but maybe we only have Wi Fi in the cafe, or maybe we only have Wi Fi in the library. Well, that doesn't lend itself to people who either cannot get to those areas or choose not to, right? So that's number one, like the accessibility that you and I talked about before when we're talking about communities. But then the other thing is, I've seen communities who really do a really good job of patting themselves on the back about the use of technology and the availability of technology for their residents. Um, but maybe they only have 2 or 3 iPads for 160 people in a community. And they want all of these people to share these 3 iPads and they get to feel good about, having Wi-Fi in these certain areas and providing iPads for people who may or may not use them. But do we have anyone? First of all, you hardly have any iPads to begin with, but then who's really teaching them how to use it? Who has the time? Who's making the time to show people how they can FaceTime with their older adult children or with their grandchildren? Who's taking the time to show people that they can actually blow up the size of the text when they're reading articles on their
Right.
iPad? That's not happening. That's not happening on a large scale. So even though we're saying, we have a community that is really tech savvy, number one, it's not. And number two, it's not just the older people, those residents in that community that need help. learning how to use the technology, oftentimes it's the people that are working there that do not know and do not understand how to use this new technology. And so it just goes nowhere. It just goes nowhere. And then what happens is months down the road, when somebody does have the time to actually look at a log and see how many iPads are being checked out or ask around, what they're finding is, oh, there's really not a need for this. People really don't care about using it. And so it goes away. It goes away. Nobody ever updates the iPad, then it's not working. And this is how we sort of rationalize us not going further and learning more and teaching more and making technology more widely available to older adults. And they need it right now. You have to think about all of these folks who are on lockdown. They need it. They need to be able to use technology. I think another thing that happens is not just for team members working in communities, but also family members. They say, I'm going to move mom into, Shady Pines, whatever it is, because mom needs the extra care, but mom also needs the socialization. She's not getting any visits. She needs friends. But that is false security, because it is highly unlikely that you are going to get someone, an older person at that, who's been an introvert all their lives, okay? You're not going to all of a sudden move them to a senior living community and all of a sudden they're the life of the party and they have tons of friends. No, you know what they do? Now they just barricade themselves in their apartment. That's it. That's it. And now they only see the housekeeper, or they only see the maintenance man, or they only see, dietary aides when they go down and pick up their food, because they're not even eating in the dining area anymore. And so how can we use technology to help these folks too become, more socialized, more aware of their community, more involved in their community? We can do that. We can do it if we know how. And honestly, if we have the wherewithal to think about how important it is for people. And that doesn't always happen.
Right. It's true. So one of the things that that you've mentioned in some of the workshops that I've attended before is unconscious bias.
Mm-hmm.
And would you mind just taking a moment to explain to the rest of us, what is unconscious bias, and how do you think that manifests itself in terms of the intersection of technology and older adults?
So unconscious bias are those automatic thoughts that we have in our mind. They are the result of the way we were brought up, what we've experienced, what we've been told, true or false. And they aren't conscious thoughts, hence unconscious bias. They just come up on their own. And so what I like to tell people is your unconscious thoughts, your unconscious bias are the result of those first thoughts, those ones that come up automatically. And we might not be able to control those thoughts. So we can't hold one another responsible for those first thoughts, right? But we should train ourselves to ask about those first thoughts, because we are responsible for that second thought. So how does it lend itself to the way we talk about older adults and technology? Maybe it sounds like they don't need it because older adults don't care about Facebook. They don't need it because older adults don't care about TikTok or Instagram. They don't need it because, Mrs. Pearl will never FaceTime with her daughter because it frustrates her. Maybe all of that is true, but maybe it's not. So we make a lot of assumptions and we make a lot of decisions for older adults, sometimes based on how we feel about technology. If it's a pain in the butt to me and I don't like, having to have 50 passwords to log on to something, and I'm in my 40s, I might assume that somebody who's 70 definitely won't do it. But that might not be true. But that's my unconscious bias. That's me when this person shows up in my office, in my community, that's me making an assumption about them when I really don't know. That's my unconscious bias showing up. My unconscious bias might say, older people don't like technology. They cannot learn it. Not they don't want to. Literally, some people think they cannot learn it. So there's no sense in me asking them when I'm asking for all their contact information. There's no sense in me even putting on that sheet, how do you communicate with your family? Through social media, through Facebook, through TikTok, through Instagram, through WhatsApp, through Zoom, because I am assuming that these older adults don't even know what I'm talking about. And some of that may be true, but it might not be.
Yeah, I think that oftentimes in my experience anyway, in working with older adults in technology, certainly there's a lot of jargon that gets tossed around, technical jargon that
Yeah.
that older adults, just haven't been exposed to, and so they may not know what it means. What's a tweet? You know, what's
Right.
um, what's an instant message? On the other hand, because of the
How do I
unconscious
DM
bias,
somebody? What does that mean?
right? Um, and because of those unconscious biases, older adults don't really have the representation within the industry as far as technology is concerned, where their needs and their desires are kind of, if not top of the list, at least on the list, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Right.
and I think again that comes down to, I think um, I'm sorry, not non-majority, but majority culture,
Mm-hmm.
folks, young, professional, the folks who are designing these things, they don't always necessarily take the older population, into consideration when they're designing software and hardware. So
Mm-hmm.
I think I think it's an issue that hopefully, as we move forward, especially I would hope COVID has had some bearing anyway on the industry as far as trying to involve more older adults in usability studies, user experience design, that type of thing, just so that that their needs are addressed along with the younger population. That's my hope
And if I
anyway.
could just point out really quickly too,
Please.
if I could just point out how closely related um, discrimination against people who are differently abled and ageism is related. So if you're an older person and you're differently abled, man, you can really see that technology, how difficult it might be for someone to learn how to use and operate some of these systems. I'll tell you, the other night, I was tired. I don't have any physical um, disadvantages that I can think of right now, but I was just tired and maybe I should have eaten too. I could just notice that my hands were just shaking a little bit, right? And I'd been holding the phone up like this for who knows how long. So it could have just been like my muscles in my hand. But what I did was accidentally, as I was supposed to be scrolling, I was hitting like on stuff that I didn't want to just because my thumb was just falling as I was doing it. And I was thinking, if you're a person um, who struggles with like muscular dystrophy or
Hmm.
any kind of disability that makes it difficult for you to hold on to, like dexterity issues, this would be an issue
Sure.
for you. This would be an issue for you. And so, feeling frustrated, you might say to yourself, I'm just not going to do this. I'm just not going to use technology because it's obvious that it was not made for me. Like, that's what happens. And so, when I talk to CEOs and leaders in different capacities. But specifically, when I'm talking about how to create cultures of belonging, I
Mm.
always make sure when we talk about all the different types of diversity, I never forget about older workers and how desperately we need them instead of pushing them out. We need them. We need them because they help us cover some of these blind spots we have, especially for, like you said, people in tech who are designing technology for people and they're forgetting about older adults. We need them at the table. We need differently able people at the table. We need Black and Brown folks at the table. We need LGBTQ folks at the table. Because when we do not include all of these people, we're forgetting about somebody. And when you forget about somebody, the notion is, true or not, you don't care because you didn't include
Yeah,
me. And that might not always be true. But when I'm left out, that's how it will make me feel. And so we need to make sure that we have all of these folks at the table. There's lots of types of diversity, as many kinds of people, different cultures, different communities you can think of, whether we're talking about tech or we're talking about PR and putting together marketing strategies. You need these folks at the table, all of them.
definitely. I just want to acknowledge some of the comments that we're seeing in the chat here. Patricia, thanks for providing us some feedback during the discussion. I'd like to maybe just open it up a little bit more to the audience. Do you folks have any comments or questions that you'd like to verbalize or to make at this point? Please go ahead.
I'll kind of go for. Oh,
Go
go
ahead,
ahead, Ralph. Well, I know Ralph. I know. I know Ralph. I know Patrick, and I'm so glad I came today to meet you, Ayana, with your insight that you're bringing to the table. Ran a little late. I turned on my laptop, and of course, it wanted to do an update. So
Never fails, right?
Yep, it never fails. Patricia, nice meeting you. I'll give you a quick rundown of what I do, and it's related to everything that you've been talking about. I used to work for Verizon in business development, and I now broke off on my own as of last month. And my company is Mobile Office Strategist. It is the whole idea of kind of shoving your office, your life into your phone. The biggest issue, and I know you said it, is understanding that not everybody interacts with that data the same way. I'm working with a client right now. Their youngest member in the company, female, is 22, ADHD. She asked me why I even asked that question. I said, because I need to make sure whatever software we use, whatever applications we use, you're able to understand it and able to focus on it. Because if you can't focus on it, you're the main conduit for all the data for all the people in the field. And then I have Dave, who is the owner. He's the oldest guy in the crew. He's 52. You know, he could care less about a smartphone. He just uses it to talk and text. And, you know, he understands that he has to now use it for more than just a talk and text device. So, I mean, you do really have to look at, and again, nobody is really doing it, of making the software, making the hardware capable of working across all those swaths of different people, different ethnicities, different ideologies, different ways of interacting. I'm a military brat, and I can tell you right now, I have friends in Europe who use their phone differently than I do. And it's enlightening when I talk to them about, oh, you do that on your phone? Oh, wow. No, I never thought of that. And vice versa, you know, and I'm in the industry. It's kind of, you know, really telling about how everybody does use their devices very differently. But I'm glad I joined up. Patrick, thanks for having me today. And you know, I'm going to kind of keep it down to a low roar back here in the background.
No worries. No, I appreciate you chiming in. Thanks, Carlos. And thank you for joining today.
Yeah, Carlos, if I could just say something about that too. You know, it's unfair that we say, you know, young people will be able to grab onto this type of technology really quickly and older people will not, because I have been extremely frustrated with my own technology over the last couple months. I was talking to Patrick about it earlier. Just, you know, trying to deal with my live stream, trying to figure out what kind of computer do I need. I don't understand gigabytes. I don't understand gigahertz. I don't understand, you know? And so it really makes me want to just like toss my computer out of the window. But if I go to Best Buy, which I did, and they start talking to me about a computer, they start using all of these words because they think I'm supposed to know what they mean. Because I'm Gen X and we, you know, we have smartphones and we have computers and we have laptops and we have iPads and we have all this technology, and they assume that I should know what all of it means. I don't know what the hell a terabyte is. I don't know, you know? But I'll bet you if I were an older person and I came to ask about my computer and what's the best type of computer, they would have taken their time with me. They would have taken the time to explain things a little bit better. So when we
and I
talk
know
about ageism, go ahead,
these
Carlos.
guys talk about it, and I've talked about it before in other meetings. One of the things when I went to college, I wanted to be a systems analyst, and I hated the fact that all my courses had to be retaken every semester because it was already obsolete by the time I finished the course, right? So I
Mm,
switched from
mhm.
that to business management, business marketing as my major and a minor in computer science. I'm so glad I did, because one of the biggest takeaways from that is that I can explain technology to anybody. I can
Yeah,
explain why the data has to flow from this software to this software. What I do today, every day when I talk to new clients, is explain how the data is already there. Don't repeat it. Don't have redundancy. I mean, I see people with their phones that'll have 4 different cloud systems, and they don't know where that picture is from grandma from 4 Christmases ago because it's saved in a different folder. They don't know where the hell it is. The data's there.
yep,
It's just there's no organizational setup, and nobody teaches this. That's the biggest issue.
yeah,
Nobody teaches that,
yeah,
hey, if you've got a Google phone, stick with the Google Drive if that's your main focus and it's just personal. But if you're running a business, maybe use Google and send certain information to that, to your Google Drive, and send certain information to a Dropbox or a Box or OneDrive. And how to separate those two worlds, nobody teaches that. Nobody shows people that.
yeah.
And it's really frustrating to people of any age. I've noticed it does make a
Yes,
difference.
Yeah.
You'll have a
yes.
kid that, like my nephews and nieces will ask me about how to use their cell phone, and they're in their early 20s, because they
Yep.
see me doing things on my phone, and they're just like, whoa, how the heck did you do that? And I don't know, Ralph and Patrick, I'm going to ask you guys, you've seen me on plenty of Zoom meetings. Does my picture look any different to you guys today? My video?
You got a logo in the corner that I haven't noticed before.
Yeah. hmm
So that's
Something different about the picture. I don't know, maybe not.
No,
Yeah.
there is. It's actually a lot clearer. So I'm using an old Samsung cell phone now that I had
Mm,
extra, which has a high res camera on it, than using my laptop camera. And again,
Yeah.
it took me about an hour to try about 10 different programs to find the one I like. That was an hour of my time that, now I
There you go.
can, because I tried all the
Ah,
different ones, because one of the biggest issues most people having right now is they can't get their laptop to work on their camera, or their audio, their microphone doesn't work anymore, or it's so old that the drivers don't work with Zoom or GoTo meeting or any of those other ones.
mhm.
So I told
yep.
myself yesterday, I said, I have to figure out how to use this phone, because it seems like everybody has an extra phone nowadays.
Yeah.
But the camera, even on a camera that's 2 or 3 years old, is way better than the laptop camera of a laptop from 10 years ago or 5 years ago. I mean, I see people still trying to
Mhm.
use an old laptop
Yeah.
to run their business, and yet they'll have the new iPhone 12 that they just bought last week. And I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
true.
If I can toss in my 2 cents on,
please.
I think about this, the way I think about it. I got to step back a little bit. The technology is that we have available today. If you knew nothing about technology, you would have to go up the learning curve from 0 up to where we're at today in technology to understand what you've got in front of you and how to use it. Okay. Now, if you think about different age groups, um, one of the first pieces of technology that I grew up with, and I'll use it as an example, is that I started out, or I am familiar with the concept of a party line. Yeah, having
Mhm.
grown up in
Mm,
rural America. Okay, so now, I mean, you take people that are, party lines, no microwaves, no cell phones. Al Gore hadn't invented the internet yet, and you go all the way up to, well, yeah, we did a pretty cool thing, put a man on the moon, but I mean, think about the technology today. So the people that are born within the last 10, 15 years or so, or 20 years, okay, where did they come into that spectrum? Okay, they came
yeah.
in on it, way past the party line thing. So, and maybe it's people are intimidated to learn that, but I'm sure that there is a lot of people, or the majority of people, that if you would categorize them as old folks that don't do technology, okay, if you take that bucket, I bet there's a bunch of them that would love to get engaged. But Ayana, it's what you were talking about earlier. It takes training. It takes proper and albeit patient training to get someone from the party line level of technology up to being able to FaceTime with their kids. But I guarantee they're smart enough to know it and to learn it. It's just you just got to teach it and adjust teaching styles. Teaching style to someone that's 30 years old today, is a lot different than if you're trying to teach someone that's 60 years old. So
Sure, you bet.
mm-hmm.
And I think that the stereotypes about older adults and their ability or the lack of ability to learn technology, they're kind of self-perpetuating, in the sense that if I'm an older person and I've heard often enough that you just don't have what it takes to use this stuff, that it's beyond your abilities, you're going to start to believe that. Or you're going to, you might even feel some shame about the fact that, I haven't been exposed to this stuff and therefore I don't know how to use it. And that is totally self-defeating as well.
Yeah.
Patricia, you had several comments in the chat, and I just wanted to give you an opportunity to speak up, and if you'd like to contribute to the conversation as well, please go ahead.
Well, thanks so much. I was mainly responding to what people were saying, and thank you, and acknowledging it and whining a little bit about some of my own experiences. And I guess my question is, to all of you, what do you see as a solution for addressing the problem of ageism with regard to technology? Because I have to say, I have been using technology since before it was a word, really, before it was popular. And I still have my 1984 Mac, and it still runs.
Wow.
I've kept it because
floppy disks.
Yeah, I get it out of storage every once in a while and plug it in. It goes, but that's somewhat a symbol of my years. But it's also a symbol of, since 1984, I've been changing operating systems several times a year. So it's not, one of the challenges I've run into is people make assumptions based on decades, whether or not I can even use a computer, which is ridiculous. I can probably, just race them to the end quicker. When I've worked in companies, and I think what many younger people don't understand is that they want me to stand over their shoulder and watch them really quickly go through their workflow. I can't even see the computer because unless I sit in their lap, I can't get that close to see the tiny little thing. I mean, now I know I would have to wear special glasses, but when it first happened, it was very disconcerting and people thought I just didn't understand. And it's also a matter of learning style. Some people go zip, 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 and that's all they need. I actually need to do it myself. Different people learn differently, but mainly, and this is also really, it's astounding to me that most people have had training in technology. I've had my own business mainly. I've worked for companies in advertising marketing, but I mainly have to learn it myself. Right now, I've got this, I don't know if you can see it, I've got this big, desktop Mac that I use for photos, to edit photos. I have a writing and photography business. And I have to learn Lightroom on my own. I have to learn all the upgrades on Photoshop on my own. I mean, I don't have time to go be tutored in all this stuff. I just have to figure it out. But not everyone has that protocol. So I guess my main question, and I'll stop talking. You should open the faucet here. My main question is, how do you start in a polite way inside a work group or a company to who generally are run by millennials and Gen X's and that age group, how do you let them know that just because a person has more experience doesn't mean, I mean, this is a weird thing. You have more experience and therefore you know less than I do. I mean, it's just kind of these two ideas that don't make sense to me. Thank you.
So if I can just say that I think all of that starts with leadership and empathy. And I just talked the other day about empathetic leadership and how in order to make cultural changes and to even be able to address something like you want to address, Patricia, is you have to have the ear of somebody at the top who understands why this could be an issue, right? You have to have somebody that understands not everybody learns the same. And not everybody who's a leader is a good teacher. They're just not. I have not always been a good teacher. That's why I work by myself, because I know how I like to learn. And, I'm a hands-on learner too. Like you, Patricia, don't be hanging out over my shoulder and telling me to push this button. No, let me sit down and do it. So I think there has to be someone who says, there are people here who may learn differently. Let's pair them with somebody who it will work for them. It will work for them. And that doesn't always happen. And I think that's why sometimes we have such toxic work environments, because number one, the first thing is we don't have the trust that we need to be able to go to the people who have the ability to make a difference and say there's an issue here. Like that's number one. We don't have that ability. So if you want to make any kind of change, whether it's about technology, it's about social justice, I know we'll talk about that a little bit, whether it's about, how do we make different people feel more included, all of that has to start with a conversation built on trust. And if you don't have that, you're not going to go anywhere. That's just what it is. Truly. I have to have enough trust within my organization to go to someone who has the ability to make a difference. I have to be able to go to them and say, hey, I feel like you're leaving these people or this person or me out of the conversation. I really want to learn this, but I learn a different way. Can we talk about some other ways we can accomplish this goal? Like it has to be an honest conversation. And sometimes we can't have those conversations. We should be able to, but that's just the truth of the matter. Sometimes we cannot get there because we cannot go there.
What do you think gets in our way of having those kinds of conversations or even just starting those kinds of conversations?
No trust. Is my boss going to be upset when I come to them and tell them X, Y, and Z? Are they going to feel threatened? Are they going to retaliate? Will they tell other people? How will it affect my relationships here at work? I can only speak for myself in saying that just in my last position, I noticed a lot of things that I didn't like, but I didn't trust the people who I should have been able to trust to go and say, hey, I don't like this, because I didn't know how my job was going to be affected. Maybe they're going to move me to a different department. Maybe they're going to say I'm hard to get along with. Maybe they're going to say this just, it really isn't a problem. And then I'm going to have to deal with all of this stuff internally and ask, am I making a big deal when it's not? And sometimes it's just easier to stay quiet. But when people find it easier to stay quiet when things are bothering them, they're going to eventually spill the tea anyway. They're just going to wait till they leave to do it. Yeah. So at the end of the day, it all boils down to, is there trust with leadership? Do we have a relationship? Because if I'm in a relationship with you, I can talk with you. And I think that's a barrier a lot of times. We work with people all day, every day who we really don't know and who we don't get to be ourselves with. And because we don't get to be ourselves, we don't build trust. And so we don't bring up the things that matter.
It's funny you say that, Ayana. I'm going to go back to when I switched from my IT consulting firm back in 2015 and decided to move to Colorado. That's how I ended up at Verizon. Verizon was knocking on my LinkedIn door and said, "Yeah, it sounds like you got a lot of sales experience." And I'm like, "Yeah, but I don't sell cell phones." And I realized though that everything that I'd been doing on the consulting side of the IT side was all going toward the mobile world. And so I made that conscious decision. It's like, hey, I'll take a huge pay cut to learn everything I can about the mobile world. And I'm so glad I did. That was, it's almost 4 years ago now. But during the training, I was the oldest guy there, just hands down. I mean, everybody's in their early 20s, maybe late 20s. I think there was one guy that was 31. At the time I was pushing 45, 46, something like that. And, they were going through the training. And initially, right out of the gate with the training, I realized, man, I could be doing this training, but I'm not going to say anything. Right. And, I would bring up points, and I could tell the trainer was like, don't ask me that stupid question, that, you'll figure that out later. It was like, well, you kind of need to know that to get to the next step of progression of what we're trying to what you're trying to teach us. But again, it wasn't my place at that time. And, luckily they got me out of the sales floor, because I was working the store for the first year, and it was like painful. The guys were like, well, how are you able to sell so much? I'm like, I just have a great conversation with a client. I understand mobile technology better than you do. I know. But I'm glad they got me off the floor, because I was able to go into the business development, which is where I really thrived for a while. But it is one of those things where, and, as a national sales trainer that I used to work for JBL back in the day, I would notice I would have 100 people in a room. I did have to at least do 2 different styles of training for the same information. Right. Yep. There's more than that, but I would force myself to do 2 different styles, because of the fact that I was hoping that even if I got half of the people with those 2 all trained up, the other half would at least show them. And what you're saying, that sometimes people don't ask for help from their peers. I see it all the time. They feel like, oh man, they're going to look down on me. And I've always tried to be an open book. It's like, hey, if you ask me, if I don't know, well, let's find out,
Same. But that can be hard in a leadership position too, right? Because leaders are expected to have all the answers. And so we get really bent up and twisted out of shape when we don't have the answer. This is for anything though. This is about anything in my experience. It's not just about leadership. This is about anything. We get twisted up about not knowing the answer. So we will make up an answer. We will make up an answer. We will regurgitate something else we've heard, rather than just say, I don't know, let me think about it, or let me find an answer. Sometimes the answer is just, I don't know. Sometimes that is the best answer. You know what? I don't know. Let me think about that, or let me go and find out. We don't do that. What we do is we get really twisted up, and then we try to make the person who might know more than us feel stupid. That's what we do sometimes as leaders. And it creates a toxic environment. Yeah. It does.
For sure. I'd like to, please, Patricia, go ahead.
I do have, my strategy, I agree with everything you've said here about the environment. And I will say that my strategy has just been to go along and get along. But after a while, that doesn't work, and I spill the tea. I spill the beans.
Mm-hmm. Spill it, girl.
So frustrating after a number of months.
Yep.
So I am wondering, for those other generations that tend to have certain ideas, and some of them are really good, some of the ideas, but in order to project knowledge and ability, and at the same time being able to say, I don't know, I am always thinking of what are 2 or 3 keywords I can drop into this conversation. I mean, what do they need to hear? The word overlay, or, the latest tech term with regard to digital marketing. What do they need to hear out of my mouth so they know I'm up to speed, at least somewhat? Whether or not they have the emotional maturity to admit that there's some things that they don't know. How can they
Mhm.
accept that I'm a good member of the team and have their back?
I like the fact that you said you would use some of these more contemporary terms that we're using,
Mhm.
today's terms that we're using. I hate that you feel like you have to do that, but I understand why you have to do that. I understand
I
that.
do, because
Um,
people assume I don't know. I mean, they might
yep,
think I can't even type on a computer, and I've been
yep,
typing since I'm 13. You know, they have
yeah.
these assumptions, and when they say, "Well, my mother does da 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 da," and I'm going, "Yeah."
And I can run
So,
circles around your mama and probably you too.
Hey,
and
You
Patricia.
know,
actually, literally, I can outrun them with my own 2 feet. So,
Wow. What,
I love it.
Patricia, you know what I do? And this was a piece of contention with Verizon because I would go to at least one or two different unrelated software applications, seminars, training, YouTubes, any of those, so that I at least understood what they were talking about. Maybe I didn't
mhm.
understand how to implement it sometimes. Like I just did a YouTube optimization course online. It was like 2 hours, and just the acronyms that I heard thrown around, I'd never heard them before until last week. Because a lot of people are all about SEO and regular Instagram and Facebook optimization. YouTube is optimization is a whole another world that I didn't know about personally, but now at least I can have a conversation about it. Would I say I'm an expert? No, but just being able to have that conversation to other people, I'm an expert.
Mhm.
Mhm.
It's
Yep.
kind of weird how that works.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And Patricia, I like that you said you're asking the question, but I think you're also answering. I think you're
Mhm.
already doing the right thing, which is dropping these little nuggets to let people know, listen, I know what I'm talking about. You know, I hate that, again, I hate that you have to do that. But sometimes we have to do that. We have to do that just to prove our worth. And sometimes even then, you might have somebody that's, now I'm offended because I thought you didn't know anything. And it turns out you might know no more than me,
Yeah.
you
Oh, and
know?
people are
Um,
offended.
yes. So then really, I guess what you can do to kind of bridge this gap um, is in talking about what you know, maybe asking them about what they know so that there's an
Mhm.
exchange of information and that now they don't feel, because what's going to happen, especially if you're working with somebody that's younger than you and they
Mhm.
went from
Always.
you don't know anything, I got to teach you, now went from, oh no, you know more than me. Now they're going to feel insecure and they're not going to ask you questions because
Mhm.
now you think you're my boss and you're older than me, right? So an exchange of information, me saying what I know and then maybe asking you what you think about this subject
Mhm.
might be a way to kind of build a relationship, because that's what we're doing. Um, First, we have to build this trust so that you don't think I'm just trying to one up you or I'm not trying to steal your job. I just really want to be able to work really good together because I've got to be with you more than I'm with my own family, you know,
Mhm.
outside of COVID. That's how our working conditions are. Like, I'm with you more than I'm with my family. I want to work well with you. And so in doing that, maybe sometimes we do have to do some coddling on the front end. Maybe I have to, I don't like it, but maybe I have to play down what I know just so that you can feel comfortable with me. But rest assured, I'm gonna let you know what I know when the time is right. But I'm gonna bring you along and I'm gonna ask you what you think about it and how you feel about it. Maybe I'm gonna, when I have a closer relationship with you, maybe I'm gonna bring up ageism, and not just ageism against older adults, but maybe I'm also gonna bring up how ageism affects younger adults too. You know, people think
Yeah.
millennials are lazy. People think millennials are entitled. People think millennials don't have any loyalty. They skip jobs a lot. Yeah, they skip jobs a lot because we don't have any doggone pensions anymore. I got to go where the money is, you
Mhm.
know. But sometimes people don't understand that. So how can we build some bridges here that make sense for both of us? And I like what
Right.
you said about kind of dropping some of this information and some of these terms that they may think you don't know.
Yeah. So I can just make a list of SAAS and just, go crazy with it. And
Yep.
Yeah, I know
It's
we're,
to me a ridiculous exercise. I'm used to just going in, figuring out and doing the work. But on top of that, it's really important in a corporate environment at any rate, or a large nonprofit, to also prove to
Right.
everyone that you know what you are doing.
Yep.
And that is the part that drives me crazy, literally. But right now I have my own business and I work with older adults, and I'm really held up by the fact that most of them cannot handle a 2-hour Zoom meeting for me to interview them for their memoirs. And
Yeah.
and I can't really be with them safely, I don't feel,
Yeah.
for them or for me. So I'm trying to figure out other avenues to work with them. I mean, I handle all the technology, I do everything. They don't have to really think except just talk to me about their life. And
Yeah.
I came to this meeting wondering if anyone had another idea of how to reach them that wouldn't take, so they wouldn't have to look at a screen like this for 2 hours while I talk and type.
Break it in half instead of doing
That's what
2
I was
hours. I
thinking.
mean, it makes me feel a little bit. Yep. So when I do coaching, I used to do 2-hour or 4-hour blocks.
Mhm.
But people they are zoomed out. They're done with technology. Like, and looking at this blue light all day, it really does zap your energy,
Mhm.
right?
It does.
So just breaking it in half. Instead of doing 2 hours, do 1 hour.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Do 1 hour.
You could have 1 hour. It just takes so long to gather this information, a person's whole life.
Sure.
Mhm.
And maybe the pandemic will be over by the time we're done. Who knows?
good luck.
We'll
One of the
see.
one
It-
thing
it-
I
that
know, Ralph.
works too, Patricia, is maybe try doing, and I changed this about a month or two ago on my calendar so that people could book a 45-minute session.
Mm,
Mhm.
And I was getting a lot more people booking the 45-minute session than
like
the
that.
hour.
I
Hmm.
like
And
that
just
concept.
mentally, it was, they were like, oh yeah, I can handle 45 minutes, but they couldn't handle the hour. And as of yet, I have yet to see a single 45-minute session end at 45 minutes.
Yep, you're gonna go
Yep.
out. That's right. You're gonna go over anyway.
Yeah.
You're gonna go over and just record it so that you don't have to take the time you're trying to type it while it's doing. Just record it and you can always go back.
Yep.
And Ralph, I feel like I cut you off and you were gonna say
No,
something. I'm
that's
sorry.
okay. We've been talking about, the gap in ages, and as a difference between people, and how it relates to technology. But Ayana, I'm sure you're aware that there are many other differences between people that are in a workforce, that they have to, somehow figure to get over. And I've always found that using humor is a good way to, to get kind of through those barriers. If you can, get down to a level of commonality between yourself and the other person, for whatever, maybe you both like the Broncos or something, or
Mhm.
something that, and then throw in humor wherever you can to keep the environment and the conversation light, and not get so serious. So I mean, that'll help you overcome pretty much any of the gaps or differences you might have between you and coworkers, whether it's race, sex, level of technology, or age or whatever. I think that's just, we got to learn how to get along with people, and this is just an area that, one of the other areas that we have to break through. And it's not impossible. People can do it. They just got to
It's
try
not
and be
impossible.
willing to try.
It's not impossible. So Patrick, I wonder, because I feel like this is a good segue. Can we segue into where social justice might fit into all of this
Please,
now?
please do.
Okay. So this was wonderful, Ralph, because you brought up humor as a way to kind of build bridges there. But I would tell you that can be very, very dangerous. And here's why. Because if you don't understand your own unconscious bias and your go-to is to use humor, you will end up offending people and not knowing it, using humor to build a bridge. So let me use an example. When I do workshops and I talk about microaggressions, we talk a lot about micro invalidations and micro insults. And that's when somebody well-meaning, they usually it's not intentional. They will say something offensive and they're usually using humor to kind of break the ice or break the tension. But it actually causes the person who it's aimed at to feel more anxiety. So here's an example. I use this one where a woman from India married an American man, and she was talking about her first day of work and how they were all introducing themselves. And she talked about how she met her husband online, and that she moved to America. And somebody in their group said, "So can we assume that you're a mail order bride?" So he did that as this way of humor, right? I'm just trying to make some light humor here, but it wasn't funny to her. It wasn't funny to her at all. I actually hurt her feelings. It made her feel singled out. No, I'm not a mail order bride, but this is the danger in using humor as our only way to build bridges. Because if we're operating under assumptions, if we don't know a people, a culture, we can end up offending them, and then it creates an even bigger gap. So I know Patrick and I talked before about how a lot of people think that older people cannot learn a new way. Specifically, when we're talking about our own biases and we're talking about discrimination, they will say, "That's my grandma, that's my grandpa, that's just how they are, that's just how they grew up. You just have to leave them alone." But that is not true. That is not true. Seniors are using technology, especially those who use Facebook and Twitter and just like to read different articles. They are reading it to learn and relearn, not just about themselves and their own family, but American history and how it makes them who they are. And they're learning a new way. So I don't like this notion that, an old dog can't learn new tricks. Sure, they can. If they want to eat, they can, right? They can. So if you want to be a part of a society, one that values all people, one where you can express your ideas and you can learn new ideas and there's an exchange of information, then yeah, you can learn a new way. And people are using technology to do that too. And so even learning about what microaggressions are, I'll have people in my workshop that come to episode 3 after watching episode 2 and learning about unconscious bias. And they will say, "I looked up what unconscious bias is. I looked up what microaggressions were. And wow, I saw some things I had never saw before." They're learning. They're learning.
Definitely. And I think, I also think that, in bringing it back to older adults, and technology, but just generally speaking as well. I mean, older adults have certain soft skills. They have an advantage really with soft skills that younger like employees may not have, just in terms of their ability to be empathetic, their ability
Mhm.
to be good listeners, and to actually receive the message from the person that they're conversing with, versus
Mhm.
essentially queuing up your thoughts for how you're going to respond to whatever the
Yes.
person is saying, right? Um, so I think that's, and I also think, and I think Patricia alluded to this as well earlier in the conversation, that necessity is the mother of invention, right? If I need to learn certain things in order to, if I need to learn the newest version of Lightroom in order to do my job, if I need to learn how to, engage in a social networking environment like Facebook or
Mhm.
Twitter or something like that, in order to be more engaged with my community or more engaged with my peer group, that kind of thing, I'm going to learn those things. I'm,
Yeah.
and I might have some questions. There might be some gaps in my knowledge, but um, I think that the desire to learn is there, and I think
Yeah.
everyone on this call is an example of that. So, anyhow, I
Mhm.
know we're kind of running up on time here. I guess I'd like to just give Ayana, if you'd like to, I'd like to give you the opportunity for any like closing thoughts that you have on this subject. I think it's a pretty as we can tell just from the way this conversation has gone, it's a broad subject. There's a lot to it. In some ways, we
Mhm.
barely scratched the surface. So anything you'd like,
Yeah.
any parting thoughts you'd like to give us on this subject, please?
Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me again today. It was nice to meet all of you. I think this was a really good conversation, and I just, I love to learn about other people and their experiences, and I like to share mine too. And I think that was a good example of this. So yeah, just I would love to connect with any of you. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. You can find me under Ayana King. Um, and yeah, if I have any parting words of encouragement, just keep talking, keep talking, keep talking to younger people, keep talking to older people, just keep sharing what you know to be true. Um, and don't play small. Don't play small. I think about what you said, Patricia, and how can I show what I know? And you can do it through conversation, right? So keep showing what you know. Keep talking about what you want to see changed. Um, if I've learned anything this year, specifically having to do with older adults, is that there are a lot of older adults out there who are advocates and allies and have been all their lives. Um, we just don't know them. So get to know some people.
Yes, indeed. And Ayana is a great person to follow on LinkedIn and Facebook as well. She's got insightful things to say. And on Sundays, I'm going to give you a little plug here. Sundays
Yeah,
at what time is it? It's 11 o'clock Mountain Time, so 1 o'clock Eastern
1 p.m.
Time. She does well, I'm going to let you speak for yourself because you're more articulate about it than me, obviously. So
Thank you. So every Sunday, I do a live show. It's on both LinkedIn and Facebook, and it's called You Choose Sundays. And I call it You Choose because whoever my guest is, they literally pick what we talk about. So I might have somebody who is a tax preparer on, but just because she prepares taxes doesn't mean we won't be talking about, eating crab legs for Thanksgiving. Who knows what we're going to talk about? But it's always such a great conversation. And I love You Choose Sundays because it gets to the heart of who people are. No matter what their professional title is, no matter if they're a business owner, no matter if they're a team member, whether they're the janitor or they're the CEO, they have something valuable to add to whatever conversation they're in. And I just like to be a part of that. I am, my mother always told me growing up, I was nosy. I just like to say I'm very inquisitive and I love people and I love to know about people. So yeah, join me on Sundays. You Choose Sunday every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you ever want to come on and talk about something, let's do it.
I was on a couple of weeks ago and it was great. It was a great
It was a
experience.
good
So
conversation. Yeah,
yeah,
you can go back and look
well,
because
that's
they're
right.
posted there.
Very good.
Ayana, if you'll have me, I'd love to kind of see what that's all about. Bring my insight to
Yeah,
that. But I'll leave on a parting thought. Kind of what everybody's talking about here. You really don't age until you stop learning, and that's, I think, the
that's
biggest
right.
thing that people tend to forget. It's like, just because the gray hair is coming in doesn't mean I've stopped learning. And
That's
that's
right.
I think that's where people tend to forget, the younger millennials and people that I've worked with. It's like, oh, you're older, you really don't, you can't learn, or you're not learning. I'm like, man, I have access to all the same information you do. It's no different.
Yep,
Mhm.
yep.
Right.
Stay inquisitive.
Yep.
Stay
Yep.
curious.
That's right. For sure. Well, anyhow, everyone, thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate your time. Appreciate you taking the time. These are important conversations to have. Um, I hate to hear that examples of folks running into those walls of ageism, of sexism, of all the other isms that racism, everything else that is just such a an unnecessary but a very hard fact of these phenomenon that exist in our culture, and just having these conversations is just one more step on that road to making it better for everybody.
That's
So
right. That's
thank
right.
you again for joining us today, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and thanks so much.
And
Thanks,
Patrick, I'm going to
Bye,
be,
Thanks for
everybody.
I'll be
hosting.
seeing you more
Bye.
often.
Good to see you.